Guys, I'm pissed. There were some things in week 11 that just really pissed me off, and you can expect some rants during the breakdowns of the Texans and the Steelers games. I mean, my team won last week, and I'm still just so irritated with the NFL suits in New York. If you want to hear my rants, that's fine. Don't forget to use those timestamps in the description and in the pinned comment to skip them and just move on to the next pick. And don't worry, I don't even address the Colin Kaepernick workout that happened on Saturday last week, because that stuff is just way too deep for your friendly neighborhood NFL pick'em video. Last week, I experimented with adding a playoff prediction to these weekly pick'em videos, and then I asked you guys if it was something that you would want me to do each and every week down the stretch, and the people have spoken. So stay tuned to the end if you want to see the playoff picture with my picks from this week and some early projections for how the rest of the regular season might play out, which will give us a look at some potential playoff matchups. With that said, the goal in this video is still 500 likes. Please help me and help support this channel by hitting that like button so that the YouTube algorithm knows that this video doesn't completely suck, especially if you're watching the game before Thursday Night Football, because reaching that goal within the first 24 hours is crucial. Also, if this is your first time watching, I hope that you'll subscribe and join us for the rest of the season. I will be coming out with my next mock draft after this week of football, using the standings post week 12 as the order. With Tua Tagovailoa dislocating his hip, I think a new mock draft is definitely necessary. Let's jump into week 12. On Thursday Night Football, we've got Colts at Texans. The Colts impressively bounced back, and even after going down 7-0 early on, they were able to win a crucial game last week against the Jaguars in Nick Foles' first start since week 1. I bring up the fact that they were not the first team to score of that game, yet still won, because in the NFL, the team that scores first wins 60% of the time, and that percentage increases even more when those points are in the form of a touchdown rather than a field goal. The Colts obviously defied those odds, came back and won, but that's because they were able to tie the score up at the end of the first quarter, leveling the playing field once again. Now, the Ravens and the Texans game was supposed to be one of the best matchups of the season. I hyped it up as potentially the game of the year, but the refs not only missed a blatant defensive pass interference call, but they continued their stubborn approach to this new rule, allowing coaches to challenge their pass interference calls, and they still did not call this pass interference. That means that a ref looked up close at multiple angles of Marlon Humphrey tackling DeAndre Hopkins in the end zone before the ball arrived, likely spoke with someone on the phone from the NFL office in New York about this play, and still chose to ignore one of the most obvious pass interference calls you will ever see. At this point, who knows if they'd even overturn that call from the Saints game that started this whole thing. I mean, what are we even doing here, guys? I'm assuming that this rule was added just so that if it happens in the playoffs, we don't send a team to the Super Bowl again that probably shouldn't have been there. But if that's the case, just make it a playoff rule. And I know the argument to this is that it wouldn't have mattered anyways because the final score ended up being so one-sided. And yeah, maybe, but that's not typically how this works. And the Texans should have at least gotten a field goal with the ball being placed on the goal line after the penalty. From the game's momentum to the Texans' game plan, everything about this game changed from that point. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the refs in the NFL stole an opportunity for a team on the road to gain that slim advantage after scoring first against one of the best teams in the league. And more importantly, they stole an opportunity for us to see two of the best young quarterbacks go head to head with each other. And a better coach team probably wouldn't have laid down quite like the Texans did after that, but that was a pretty demoralizing no call. I mean, you saw how the whole city of New Orleans acted for months after theirs, but we will see the true coaching barometer for Bill O'Brien by seeing how the Texans respond on a short week against a Colts team that is severely undermanned due to the injury bug just ravaging through their roster. I do apologize for the negativity. I typically like to make these pick'em videos a little bit more upbeat and positive going into each week, and I don't want to take anything away from the Ravens because honestly, I'm all about the quarterback renaissance that's taking place in the NFL right now. I just wish we could see a similar youth movement at the top and get the old heads running the league out of there, because we as fans deserve a better quality product than what we're getting right now. Texans win 27-19. Buccaneers at Falcons. The Buccaneers predictably lost to the Saints last week at home, but they've been playing a lot better on the road this year anyways. The intriguing part of this matchup is most definitely the sweeping difference in the Falcons defense. I mean, this is a completely different team than the one we saw in the first half of the season. Why it took so long for Dan Quinn to surrender defensive play calling duties, we'll probably never know, but this is looking a lot more like the team I expected coming into the season. It's a shame that they're basically already eliminated from the playoffs with the NFC having such a log jam for those 2 wildcard spots, but playing spoiler should make them a fun team to pick in some upsets moving forward, where we would have probably all had them as an easy team to pick against 2 weeks ago. I personally needed to see the Falcons defense do it one more time to believe it, and they had Kyle Allen shook. I wouldn't be surprised to see them do it again because of the familiarity playing against Jameis Winston and the current state of the Buccaneers offensive line. Falcons win 31-21. Broncos at Bills. At least for the first half of games, these two teams have been mirror copies of each other this season. However, in the second half, the Bills have done a pretty good job of actually closing out games, while the Broncos have not. With already blowing 4 fourth quarter leads this season, there's something not clicking about this team when they should have the game wrapped up. I was shocked to see them up 20-0 against the Vikings, but I think that this mismatched stat shows how mismatched this matchup was. That was a tongue twister. And maybe the Broncos got kind of lucky early on and caught the Vikings off guard, because obviously the better team in the end won. But let's not waste too much time on those chokers. Josh Allen had a career game in Miami, and I don't want to discredit that because of the opponent. We all always seem to do that on a week-to-week basis, but give the man some credit. The Dolphins have been playing better lately, even on defense, but you want your franchise quarterback to look like he's playing Madden on rookie difficulty level against a lesser opponent like that, and that's exactly what you got from Josh Allen last week. This week, I think they keep it going. Bills win 24-13. Giants at Bears. This is a pretty pathetic matchup that I don't want to spend a lot of time on, but I'm just not ready to start skipping games altogether just yet. The Giants are coming off their bye week, so they could come out with a great game plan and take advantage of a wounded Bears team. It's also possible that Mitch Trubisky magically heals up this week and has a bounce back game against the Giants' poor defense. If the Bears thought they were getting this cerebral quarterback when they drafted Mitch Trubisky, then they were sadly misinformed, but it's more likely that they end up moving on from their second overall pick sooner rather than later. What I don't understand is why Matt Nagy continues to ask Trubisky to do things that he just doesn't excel at, and yet doesn't have him doing the things that he does do well, like throwing on the run and moving around and using his athleticism more. Could be because Trubisky seems to be getting banged up every other week, but the game plans just haven't been that great offensively either. So if you're getting rid of Trubisky, you might as well fire your head coach while you're at it. But in this one, the Bears defense should be able to keep this Giants offense at bay long enough for Trubisky and Nagy to get their shit together. Bears win 24-21. I want to take a break and thank the sponsor of these weekly NFL Pick'em videos, Overlay Fantasy Sports, for making this possible each and every week. Overlay Fantasy Sports is a revolutionary new way to play DFS. For the NFL, these sit or start matchups are where you get to pick who you think is going to produce the most fantasy points each and every week. You pick between 12 of their preset options with 3 alternatives just in case somebody ends up being a late scratch. If you get 8 of the 12 right, you're likely going to end up in the payout bracket, but with their progressive bonus, you could potentially win over $1,000 in these groups that only cost $250 to enter. You can download their app on the App Store or go to overlaydfs.com to start playing this weekend. Shout out once again to Overlay Fantasy Sports for helping me make these videos every week. You can help support me by supporting them. Let's get back to these picks. Dolphins at Browns. If the Dolphins want to win another game, here's a ready-made opportunity for them. They're going to need to jump out to a quick lead to demoralize this Browns team even more, to just possibly make them quit altogether. I think that's where this Browns team is at right now. This game is going to determine whether or not they want to come together and make a run at the wild card, or continue to be an undisciplined mess, which will in turn result in Freddie Kitchens getting fired. I'm going to lean towards thinking that this unfortunate situation brings the team closer together and refocuses their mindset as a whole. Browns win 33-24. Steelers at Bengals. So how about that Thursday night SmackDown last week? I mean, that really got out of hand quickly. Myles Garrett, he obviously deserved a suspension for what he did, and so did everyone else involved. Everybody. Most importantly though, the guy that started it. If you don't hold him accountable, then you're opening the door for it to happen again, or even worse, somebody else taking it into their own hands. After the helmet hit heard round the world, I was up until 2 a.m. probably typing up a script to a rant video about the lack of ownership from Mason Rudolph in his post-game press conference, where he called Myles Garrett cowardly and bush league, but didn't even acknowledge the fact that he did start this fiasco by trying to rip Garrett's helmet off after a sack with 8 seconds left on the clock. Yeah, Garrett might have laid on Rudolph for a little bit too long, but that doesn't excuse trying to rip someone's helmet off. I actually ended up going to sleep that night because I was unsure if I should share what was at the time the clear-cut, unpopular opinion compared to most of the people that I follow on Twitter at least. Luckily, cooler heads eventually prevailed, and while I still feel like I'm in the minority here, I think it's pretty clear to a lot of people that Mason Rudolph was undeservingly given a pass here. The guy was having a terrible game. Like, he threw 4 interceptions, and when the game was basically over, he decided to throw a hissy fit and tried to remove the helmet of a guy that is one of the most physically gifted specimens we've ever seen come through the NFL. When his attempt to remove Garrett's helmet failed and Rudolph's helmet got removed instead, Mason Rudolph needed to be the one to walk away from the situation and let this get resolved by his offensive lineman handling his dirty work for him. But no, he acted like a small child and charged back towards Myles Garrett like his helmet was his favorite toy and he was afraid he'd never get it back. So childish. Now, this is not me trying to say that this whole thing is Mason Rudolph's fault or that what he did was worse than what Myles Garrett did, because that doesn't make any sense. Obviously, hitting someone over the head with a helmet is uncalled for. But I don't understand why as a society we cannot blame both opposing parties. It doesn't always have to be a good side and a bad side. Both Rudolph and Garrett made terrible choices on the field, but I don't believe that Garrett would have made that choice had Rudolph not initiated it twice. So to end the man's season, while the guy who started it, he gets to continue to push his team into playoff contention, or at least try to, it just feels unfair to me. But hey, maybe the greatest punishment for Mason Rudolph and the Steelers will be to continue to allow Rudolph to play for the Steelers at quarterback and show everyone that he is not really an NFL quarterback over these last few weeks. I promise you, with the way that he handled himself on and off the field afterwards, cost him a ton of respect among his peers around the league. And that might be even more detrimental to his NFL career than being suspended for one game. That's all I got for this one. Bengals still suck. The Steelers will probably still win 29-26. Panthers at Saints. I once thought that this was going to be game 1 of 2 between these two teams in the last few weeks of the season that would determine the NFC South champ. But barring a swift turnaround from Kyle Allen, I don't see how that's possible anymore. It feels like the rest of the league is caught up to Kyle Allen, which should have probably been expected at some point. But last week it looked like Allen caught a case of the Darnolds, and that's not a good sign for the Panthers trying to make a run in this NFC playoff picture. The Saints, they got back on track in Tampa Bay last week after being surprised by the Falcons defense the week prior, and I expect them to keep the train rolling back at home this week as they get ready to wrap up this division. Saints win 31-24. Lions at Redskins. The Lions were able to put up 27 points last week with a backup quarterback and a running back that they pulled off the street, but yet still managed to lose the game. Somehow though, it's the Redskins that are the bigger mess right now. After seeing this super cringy interaction between Dwayne Haskins and his offensive line during the Jets game, it's pretty clear that this Redskins team needs a complete overhaul, and I feel bad for the guy desperate enough to take over as the head coach of this team in 2020. I was shocked at how many people were hyping up Dwayne Haskins after I posted it on Twitter and trashing the offensive line. This is another circumstance where it doesn't have to be good versus bad or right versus wrong. This is bad versus bad. This is wrong versus wrong. The offensive line being so dismissive and barely even paying attention to Haskins is rude, and I wish that we had another angle of this video to see everybody else's face, because from this angle, it looks like number 66 is the only one just being a flat out jerk. But much like with the Mason Rudolph situation, I like to look at how or why did we get here, and once again, the quarterback gets the blame from me. Sure, I can appreciate a guy with drive and desire to be great, but one of the things that we've heard about Haskins since being drafted is that he's a little bit immature, and I felt like that was pretty clear after one of his first press conferences where he said he didn't like losing and they would make sure that the Redskins didn't lose again. He sounded like a pouty version of Tim Tebow, but one of the keys to being a good leader is knowing your place and how to talk to people, and the way that he addresses his offensive line here feels a little condescending and disrespectful coming from a rookie making his second start. Remember, these are the alphas in the world. These guys have got egos that we couldn't even imagine having. So knowing that hierarchy and understanding your place is important. But to me, Haskins sounds like a guy that's really never had to face any kind of true adversity throughout his football career. Maybe I'm reading too much into this. Let me know in the comments if you think so, but I'm definitely going to be checking in on this game to see if this abrasive approach works out for Haskins or if his offensive line mails it in completely. Lions win 14-7. Seahawks at Eagles. By flexing this game out of Sunday Night Football, the NFL basically gave up on the Eagles before they even lost to the Patriots last week. Think about it. They took an MVP frontrunner coming off of a bye week out of prime time in a game that was on the road against a team that had their back against the wall. Now, yes, the Packers and 49ers game definitely has more appeal to it, but flexing this game isn't a decision that's made lightly because it requires a lot of changes logistically. That doesn't mean that I don't think the Eagles can win this game, but you guys know from my midseason predictions video that I'm a big believer in the long-term ability of this Seahawks team, and that was before they added Josh Gordon. But hey, I gotta say, I've actually seen a lot of well-respected football minds join me in this prediction since then. So let me toot my little horn real quick. And it's all about Russell Wilson. When the game's on the line, there's not a lot of other QBs that I'm picking over him to drive me down the field to win the game. You know, assuming the coaching staff doesn't call a super basic passing play on the goal line. And let's go ahead and end this Carson Wentz versus Dak Prescott debate. This one should be decided frustrated by now. Dak is another clutch quarterback that I would trust in a drive me down the field, game-winning scenario. And we saw Carson Wentz have a chance to get out of Nick Foles' shadow with a crucial win against the Patriots, and he missed some really easy throws with a chance to win the game. Nelson Aguilar shouldn't have even needed to make a ridiculous catch in the end zone if Wentz just hit some earlier ones in that drive. It doesn't mean that I think Carson Wentz is a bust, but he clearly lacks confidence right now, and they might want to tear down a lot of the veteran presence on this Eagles roster so that Carson Wentz can assume that leadership role that it doesn't feel like he has right now, just so that he's not surrounded by so many guys that won a Super Bowl without him, and that might allow him to step up a little bit more. The only hesitations I have in this game would be potentially sloppy weather conditions and the 10 a.m. body clock start for the Seahawks, who are also coming off of their bye week. They could get off to a really slow start, which would play into the Eagles' favor, but I'm still going Seahawks win 35-28. Raiders at Jets. I'm not sure if the Raiders were caught off guard by the Bengals last week, but I would have liked to have seen them dominate a lesser opponent at home to give me the needed confidence in them moving forward. Instead, I came away from week 12 with concerns that I may have overvalued the Raiders offense. Now, a win is a win, so I'm not hitting the panic button or anything, but I'm also weary that they could lose this game against the Jets. The Jets got their offense back on track against the 4 defense last week, and this week they get another defense that struggles to stop the pass and may need another 4-sack game from Max Crosby. I'm not ballsy enough to make the upset pick here, but if your gut tells you to pick the Jets this week, then I would say go for it. But Robbie Anderson, he's going to need to show up in a big way if the Jets have a chance at this thing. Raiders win 34-31. Jaguars at Titans. It seemed like Nick Foles was able to ride some adrenaline to an early touchdown drive for the Jaguars, but after that the offense stalled out once that adrenaline wore off, and it took a while for him to shake the rust. I expect him to be a little bit more fluid this week within the offense, but he's also facing a much better defense. I don't want to spend too much time on this game because it could potentially be irrelevant in the long run, and it's essentially a toss-up in my opinion, but we could see a well-rested Titans team come out fast against their division rival as they make a run towards the wild card. Ryan Tannehill really deserves a lot of credit for what he's done this year coming in for Marcus Mariota, which is a pretty sad fact to come to terms with, but this team has just been way more consistent on offense since the change. However, I'm not ready to give up on the Jaguars just yet, and I think that their passing game gets rolling this week. Jaguars win 21-20. Cowboys at Patriots. This is a tough one for me to pick, and the real ones out there know why. With as up and down as the Cowboys have been this year, this is one of those games that they would just come out and win and make us think that they're Super Bowl contenders, only to disappoint in a week or two against a lesser opponent. For me, on one side, my mind is just telling me no. There's no way. But my body's telling me yes. Dak Prescott is getting MVP hype after shredding the Lions secondary, and I wish I could continue to pump that narrative up, but I just can't. Does he deserve to be in the conversation? Sure, but to me, that's just media guys trying to take advantage of the Cowboys' large fan base for clicks. If the MVP was the Heisman Award, Dak might be invited to the awards ceremony, but he'd be sitting there knowing damn well that he wasn't going to be one of the guys called. I've been a pro Dak guy since the moment they called his name in the draft. I've had moments where I was concerned with his consistency and accuracy, sure, but you got to give him credit and this coaching staff for the development that he's seen over the first 4 years of his NFL career. That's right, as much as this Cowboys coaching staff is criticized, they do deserve credit for helping Dak get to where he is at now. I mean, look at what the 2018 NFL Coach of the Year is doing with a guy that was taken at number 2 overall. Or hell, how about the genius Sean McVay with the quarterback taken number 1 overall in Dak's draft class? The issue with Jason Garrett is his reluctance to throw the kitchen sink at their opponent each week. Football coaches in general are always setting things up for later, such as establishing the run out of a certain formation on a certain down and distance so that they can eventually hit the defense with a well-timed play action later on. That's a very simplified explanation of it, but it's all part of a deeper chess match that we as viewers barely even notice. But sometimes I think Jason Garrett holds things back from the game plan to either A, simplify things for his own team, or B, because he thinks that they can out-execute their opponent and save wrinkles for later on and hopefully a playoff run down the line. In my opinion, neither option has been executed well by Garrett and company. Now, when I picked the Ravens to beat the Patriots, it felt like it was a pretty popular choice for an upset pick. This week has the same feeling with so many people picking the Cowboys, and I think it's because the Patriots have not looked as impressive offensively as they have in the past, despite their defense being one of the best in the league. The common cliche is that Bill Belichick likes to take away your best player, but nobody was slowing down Lamar Jackson this year, and the Patriots have been susceptible to getting run on, so that was just a matchup primed for the Patriots to lose. The Cowboys come in rocking the number 1 offense in the league, and Dak has been on fire, throwing the ball with touch and finesse, two things I never thought would be part of his game. But trying to win this game by testing that Patriots secondary would be a bad idea. An underrated aspect of this game that I think could be the difference is going to be on special teams. The Cowboys special teams is embarrassingly bad right now, and Bill Belichick always has tricks up his sleeve, especially when he sees glaring weaknesses like the ones the Cowboys have been putting on display each week. Ezekiel Elliott and Tony Pollard are the real reasons that they have a chance of beating the Patriots. Pollard is one of those wrinkles that hasn't been fully on display yet, but we've seen flashes. If the Cowboys can get back to their power running game with Zeke and keep the defense fresh so that Robert Quinn and DeMarcus Lawrence can pressure Brady behind one of the worst offensive lines he's had in years. Don't forget Michael Bennett's back in New England now, and I think he's probably going to want some revenge for the way he was treated. Then yeah, sure, the Cowboys could win this one, but I think it's a bad matchup for the Cowboys coaching staff, especially with the game being in Foxborough. To avoid being a homer and hopefully pull the old reverse jinx here, I'm picking the Patriots, 31-28. On Sunday Night Football, we've got Packers at 49ers. Primetime, Aaron Rodgers is going back to Cali to take on his favorite childhood team, who just happens to be playing some of the best football in the league. Well, they were until this injury bug hit them in some key places, but I think that they're playing this right by employing the next man up mentality, letting these guys take as long as they need, and relying on their elite coaching to make up for the rest. George Kittle, Emmanuel Sanders, and Dee Ford could and probably should miss this game with injuries. That means tight end Ross Dwelley, rookie Deebo Samuel, who's dealing with a shoulder injury of his own, and journeyman defensive end Demontre Moore are going to have to pick up the slack at their respective positions. If this game had stayed in the late afternoon slot, it probably would have been a lot easier for me to pick the 49ers, but I'm a big believer in Aaron Rodgers getting it done when the lights are their brightest, and I think that we've seen Jimmy Garoppolo struggling with happy feet and high passes in these scenarios. 49ers fans aren't going to be happy to see me picking against their team once again, but when I feel like they've already kind of overachieved slightly and will be missing some of the key components that made them perform at the level that they were in the first half of the season, it doesn't bode well for continued regular season success. That doesn't mean losing a game against the Packers in week 12 means that you won't be able to potentially beat them in the playoffs with a full deck of cards once again. This night just looks like it's setting up for the Packers to come in and pull the upset. Packers win 30-28. On Monday Night Football, we've got Ravens at Rams. I saw quite a few people tooting their own horn this week about their pre-draft opinions on Lamar Jackson. I'm not sure why it took them this long to feel confident enough to dig through the archives on this, but since the cool kids are doing it, hopefully you guys don't mind if I join them and share with you a video that I made before the 2017 NFL Draft about the 5 players from that draft that I thought would end up as the 5 best at their position. The video didn't get a ton of views because it didn't say mock draft in big letters on it, and I was just getting started here on YouTube. But yeah, go check that out after this if you like to revisit old hot takes. But back to this game, I mean, Lamar Jackson, he is on another level right now, and the 2019 Rams offense cannot keep up with him. I don't even think that the 2018 Rams offense could keep up with 2019 Lamar right now, but I wouldn't be mad if they decided to show up once more because that would be a really good matchup to see you go back and forth. But this Rams squad just feels like a shell of themselves, and that's really all I had to say about that. This is yet another stage for Lamar Jackson to put on an MVP performance in front of a national primetime audience. Ravens win 28-21. Now let's move on to that playoff picture. First, let's look at the AFC, which is somewhat easy to project. The Ravens, Patriots, Chiefs, and Texans should all win their respective divisions, with the Bills and the Raiders destroying all preseason predictions and making it in the playoffs as the wildcard teams. In fact, the Raiders and Bills could lose their next 2 games, both of them could, and potentially still make it in with 9-7 records. And it looks like the Colts are going to miss out on the playoffs due to a much tougher schedule than the rest of the teams in the AFC. Shifting over towards the NFC, we've got some much tougher battles for division titles everywhere except for the NFC South, which has basically already been wrapped up by the Saints. In the West, it's looking like it's going to come down to the Week 17 rematch between the Seahawks and the 49ers. Not only is the division going to be on the line, but possibly the number 1 overall seed as well. The Vikings are surprisingly in position to put some pressure on the Packers for the NFC North, but their Week 16 matchup on Monday Night Football is going to be the key to them even having a chance. The Cowboys actually beat the Patriots this week, then this division is also pretty much wrapped up, but we're looking at yet another Week 16 matchup on Sunday Night Football, this time between the Eagles and Cowboys, that will essentially be a playoff game for the division. That leaves us with wildcard matchups in the AFC of the Raiders versus the Texans and the Bills versus the Chiefs. Over in the NFC, we've got classic matchups with the 49ers versus the Cowboys and the Vikings versus the Saints. And then we've got the Ravens and Patriots, Seahawks and Packers enjoying much needed vacation on wildcard weekend. Let me know what you guys' playoff predictions are going to be in the comments below. Let's move on to the Week 11 Pick'em Group recap. So while I was watching the games last week, I thought that I had a terrible week in the Pick'em group, but when I went to check the damage, I saw that I only missed 2 games last week. I was so confused, but I think after missing the Thursday Night Football game last week and being late on my picks and not getting the Raiders pick right, I went and set some early predictions for future weeks so that I wouldn't have any blank or empty spots. And then I must have forgotten to go and change them to match the ones in the video. I guess that's a lesson in just going with your gut and don't overthink it. It was one of those weeks where the games were pretty predictable and the favorites dominated once again. So in the video Pick'em, I missed on some games where I tried to go out on a ledge. But you can tell that it was an easy week for picks because my 12 points didn't even land me on the front page of the Pick'em group. In fact, we had a 2-way tie between Alinho and CP373 for the top spot with 14 points. That means they got every single game right. Nice work. And looking at the overall standings through 11 weeks, we've got another 2-way tie, this time between Benny J and Zeke 1369. Good luck to everybody this week. Good luck to your football team. Thank you so much for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Stay tuned for my mock draft next week, and I will see you all in the next video.